What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the bench for another episode of our Tamiya D520 here on Ben Builds with Joe. Now I know Joe pushed a bit further there on the D520. He's almost done, if not all the way finished, but I still have a little bit more work to do. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. Now last episode we glued everything together. I have a couple of seams I need to go ahead and work out, but for the most part everything fits like a glove. It's a Tamiya kit, so that kind of goes with the territory. So I think what we're going to go ahead and do today, guys, is I want to push forward and first off take care of these seams. That shouldn't be that difficult to do. We've got our jeweler files, we've got our sandpaper. We're going to go ahead and get all of that nicely wrapped up, maybe rescribe a few areas here and there. Then we'll turn our attention over to some of the details around the nose, like these little intakes right here. And I think then we'll throw the tail planes on and we'll see how we go. Again, it's Tamiya, so we should be able to get these all nicely squared away without much fuss. So let's go ahead and jump into our first time lapse, grab our jeweler files, grab our sandpaper, and get these seams all finished up, rescribed, and get that nose installed. Let's do it, guys. Alright everybody, so we are looking pretty sweet and I've decided to go ahead and move over to the gun barrels. Now I know Joe loves to add in gun barrels and I've been really kind of itching to get in on that as well, but I haven't had an opportunity to pick up what he uses for gun barrels, which actually look really cool. So I've decided to go ahead and resort back to some spare brass tubing that I had lying around. Now this is not necessarily the perfect in-scale representation of gun barrels, but I think it's going to work well enough. Right now, the way the kit is designed, when you look down to where the guns are, it's just a big empty void. There's nothing in there, just darkness. So I want to go ahead and add something there. Maybe it's a bit more artistic. I don't know if you could actually see the gun barrels or not on this particular aircraft, but I'm going to go ahead and add them in anyway, just because I want to, and why not? Should be fun. So to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this brass tubing. It actually cuts very easily. It's not really as tough to cut as other pieces of tubing would be. So we're going to go ahead and just slice off a couple of pieces. We're going to install it and see how it goes. So hopefully this works out. Now, since installing one of those little pieces off camera, I have to say it actually is very, very simple. So we're going to go ahead and install the other three. I'm going to use my flush cuts because those work pretty well, but we're going to go ahead and just cut off a couple more pieces. We're going to clean up the edges, ream out the front of it so it looks a little bit bigger on the opening. Then we'll drop it in the super glue just a little bit, and then we'll tack it down to the gun port. So let's go ahead and just tack this into place and see how it looks. Not too bad. Very, very cool. All right, guys, let's go ahead and do the other two gun ports, and then we'll be back. And I think it's time to move on to the radiator and start doing some actual assembly. So this should be fun. Now let's go ahead and jump into our last time lapse here for this episode. We're going to work on the radiator. We're going to get all of these nicely installed. We're going to get some details installed as well. Then we're going to go ahead and glue on the tail planes. We're going to drill out the exhaust stacks and get everything ready for next episode, when I intend on coming back, doing some priming, and seeing how all of my seams have turned out. So back into that time lapse, guys. Let's push it forward, see what else we can do, get this thing looking the part. So not too shabby, guys, but unfortunately I have had a little bit of a mishaps here in the cockpit. When I was sanding the undersurface here, kind of rescribing and whatnot, my finger ended up hitting this gun sight, and that actually popped off both arches that I installed last episode. So unfortunately, they're gone. But that's okay, because I think this is actually better. I went ahead and cut off the little front of that gun sight and added a curved piece of solder, and that works perfectly. Tacked it in with some super glue, and then we're just going to bend down the sides and tuck them underneath the coping for that front windscreen. That should be very, very easy to do, and I think it's going to look a little bit better than the plastic. It looks a bit more uniform, a bit more even. Now I do have to come back and paint that, unfortunately. I'm going to have to use like that midnight blue color, and I'm going to have to go ahead and paint a little bit of maybe some leather right in the front of that, but I think that's going to be a really good look, and it shouldn't be all that hard to do. Now on the underside of the radiator, I did add a little bit of an actuator there for that flap. I don't know if that would be something really on the model, but I like it. You know, it's kind of fun to add little details here and there. And speaking of details, I did add in all the gun barrels, and I think those look pretty sweet. So Joe is definitely onto something when he puts in those gun barrels. I think that adds a lot of detail and a lot of realism to the aircraft. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and start looking at maybe some gun barrels and pick up what Joe uses. But other than that, everything else is coming together beautifully. It's a Tamiya kit, right? So we had a few seam issues here and there, but for the most part, everything has gone together perfectly. And I haven't had to use any of Mr. Surfacer. Tail planes dropped right into place, just kind of a plug and play deal. We got the flaps in there, went ahead and dropped those so it has a little bit more interest to it. And yeah, we are looking pretty stellar. But before we go ahead and close up the episode, I did want to go ahead and do two more things. I want to get this cockpit more or less finished up so next time I can come back and tack in that front windscreen. And the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is actually install a little piece of clear plastic to act as a gun sight. I think that'll add a little bit of realism to that scratch built gun sight that I made, and it's not really that hard. It should be a pretty simple procedure. So I've got this clear plastic card. I cut off a little square of that, and I'm just going to go ahead and incrementally shave that down until I have about the right size. Then I'll be able to go ahead and slip it in sideways and glue it down. And that should give us our nice sloped gun sight right up inside that lantern style that they have here on the D520. Made a little bit of a cut here. Let's go ahead and check out the size. Better to cut too little off than too much off, so that's fine. And then we're going to go ahead and just kind of test fit that and see how our sizing works. If it's too big, we can just shave off a little bit more and we'll be good to go. Of course, I've just dropped the piece of plastic, so I need to go ahead and find that, but it's a good idea to at least drop a couple of things each build session. Keeps you on your toes. Here it is. Let's go ahead and check it and see how it works. And if this works, if this is a good size, we'll go ahead and slip it in and tack it in with some glue. Not a problem. Should be pretty cool. Now we have that inside. Let's go ahead and give you a close-up and you can hopefully see that. My camera's not really great with fine details, but I've got that little piece of plastic card right in there glued in. I like it. I think it's a pretty nice little addition. We've got our archway, which we need to go ahead and paint, but I'm happy with it. And speaking of painting, we're going to go ahead and just use our same Gunsy color that we did before. It's almost like a midnight blue, insignia blue. I'm not really sure what they call it. It's just an FS number, but we're going to go ahead and use that Gunsy blue. And I'm going to go ahead and just touch up that archway. And next episode, we should be able to come back, mask up the canopies, glue those down so that we can go ahead and prime and get started painting. So that should be pretty good. But until our next episode, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here on Ben Builds with Joe. I know Joe is pushing forward a bit faster than I am, but I had my photo Cougar I wanted to finish up. I had my Raider ATST I wanted to finish up. So we had a lot on our plate, but those kits are finished. I love how they've turned out, so we're going to go ahead and get back on that D520. So until our next episode, you guys know the drill. Go out there and get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we'll see you back here on episode number 7 for Ben Builds with Joe and our Tamiya 148 scale D520. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.